Hey Bio20s, sorry, just making a quick protein shake before a lesson. Oh, that's good. All right, so we are going to learn about proteins today and why proteins are so important in your body. So, once again, here is your digestive system. When you eat food, whether it contains carbs, fats, or proteins, it will always go through the same process. In through your mouth, hit with saliva from the salivary gland, down your esophagus, into your stomach, into your small intestine, where we get different types of enzymes from the pancreas, bile from the liver and gallbladder, and then into the large intestine. Now, in terms of proteins are chains of amino acids. So an amino acid is a compound that we can't make, we have to get it from other sources. And when you build a protein, you essentially put these amino acids in a long chain. And the bond between amino acids is called a peptide bond. So essentially, if you have multiple peptide bonds, you have a polypeptide. So another name for a protein is a polypeptide. Now, there are 22 different amino acids out there which we cannot make. We have to get them from food. And we can get them from two different sources. We can get our amino acids from plants or animals. Now, most people think, okay, what do we need proteins for? What do we use proteins for? Use protein to build muscle. But that's only half the story, really, maybe even less. Because protein, yes, is used to build things, like building muscle, but it's also used to repair things as well. So if there's any damages to the body, cellular damage, we can repair it with our proteins and our amino acids. Also, we use it to build things in our body, not just muscle. We can build hair, antibodies, enzymes, all those different enzymes that we've been talking about, the lipase, the maltase, the amylase, those are examples of proteins, right? The antibodies that help make you, help your immune system and help you fight off diseases and infections, those are proteins. So yes, obviously protein will help build structural components like skeletal muscle, but it will also help other things. So protein, very, very important in the body. Now, proteins, they're kind of finicky little things here, which is they function really, really good at certain temperatures and certain pHs, but then they don't do so well when those temperatures and pHs change. So if you've ever cooked an egg before, you've gone through this process. So there's two different processes here. There's denaturation and there's coagulation. Denaturation is when you say expose the protein to maybe heat or pH change or whatever it might be. You actually will alter its shape, but that's only temporary. It'll go back to its regular shape and function and the enzyme will work fine. But coagulation is where you completely change the shape of a protein. So we take a raw egg, we cook it by adding heat. There's our cooked egg. We can't turn our cooked egg back into a raw egg anymore. We've completely changed the shape of the protein. So just keep that in mind. Proteins, they can be affected quite heavily by things like pH and temperature. So we want to make sure that they're functioning optimally at the best pH and temperature they can. When you look at the structure of a protein, basically the structure has 4 levels. So every protein has 4 levels. You have your primary structure, which is shown here by A. That is essentially just the chain of amino acids. So that's your primary structure. If you just have those little amino acids linked together, that's your chain. If I were to take that chain and say twist it around maybe into like a helix shape or even like a sheet shape where parts of the chain link together with other parts of the chain, then I get what's called our secondary structure, where the chain gets a little more intertwined and linked together. If I take that chain and I then fold it even more, I get our tertiary structure. And if I take that chain and fold it in with other chains and other proteins, I get my quaternary structure. So why I show you this is I'm showing you that when you're breaking down proteins, you essentially have to unravel all of these chains, break all apart all these bonds before you get down to this one here, which is your simple primary structure. Then you gotta go in and chop apart all these peptide bonds before you get to the amino acids. Okay, so last example, I think I gave you avocado toast. Let's just add on to that. We got the toast, we got our carbohydrates. We got our avocado, and let's throw some eggs in there, maybe a little bacon too, why not? So we got our protein, we got our carbs, we got our fats, right? We know when we eat that breakfast, it's gonna go into our mouth and our salivary glands are gonna activate. We have one back here and down here. They're gonna produce saliva, which will make amylase to chemically digest the carbs. Not the fat, not the protein. You're just physically breaking it down at this point. We're then down the esophagus into the stomach. Now, this is actually where protein digestion begins chemically. What happens in the stomach is we have our hydrochloric acid, we have our mucus, so both of those are working together to, hydrochloric acid, getting rid of any bad germs, bacteria that might be on our food, stomach protected from that acid with the mucus. We also have something called pepsinogen. Now, pepsinogen is an inactive form of the enzyme pepsin. So your pepsinogen is just kind of sitting there waiting. When it gets hit with hydrochloric acid, it will become the enzyme pepsin, meaning it's activated. Now, remember how I said a few videos ago, amylase doesn't really like your stomach because it's too acidic? Pepsin loves it acidic. Pepsin, the enzyme pepsin, remember it's a protein, functions best at a really, really low pH. Amylase, which is also a protein, functions best at a pH that is more neutral to basic. So they have different ranges that they function best in. So amylase won't work very well in your stomach, but pepsin will. So pepsin begins that protein digestion process, breaking apart those complex structures, starting to rip apart those polypeptides, and then we move on to the small intestine. And in the small intestine, if you guessed the pancreas is going to be involved, you would be correct. The pancreas, as well as the small intestine, are going to make two enzymes. The first one is called trypsin. Trypsin is going to take the long chain proteins, break them down into smaller chains, and then we get our ellipsin, which will break them down into individual amino acids. So here is my trypsin, right? Trypsin is going to break down my long chain polypeptides into my short chain peptides, so they're shorter. Then I get my ellipsin, both coming from the pancreas and the small intestine, which will then break down into individual amino acids. Now, at the start of the video, I showed you that I was making a protein shake, right? A lot of people will take protein shakes after something being physically active. That is to then build up muscle, give that muscle the protein it needs. Another supplement people might take is actually amino acids. And the reason people might take amino acid supplements during their workout is because the amino acids are already broken down. So when you take an amino acid supplement, it's already in its amino acid form. It doesn't have to go through all these steps. It can get into your blood quicker, so you can actually use that right away. With a protein shake, you do have to go through all these steps, so it takes a little bit longer to get into your blood. So that's why someone might do it after a workout, right? Whereas if you want the amino acids right away during the workout, you might take that amino acid supplement. Finally, we're going to take our amino acids, we're going to put them into our capillaries, into our blood, into our cells, where they can go ahead and help with our various things that our amino acids will do, like build new proteins, build new hair, build new enzymes, build new hormones, build new antibodies, build muscle fibers, help with cellular membranes. These are all things that proteins will do for us. So just a recap of the 3 nutrients that we've discussed. Carbohydrates, they come from plants and they are our primary source of energy. Lipids, they come from both plants and animals. Generally unsaturated comes from plants and oils, although fish have some unsaturated in the fish oil. Animal fats generally tend to be saturated, although things like coconuts also have saturated. They are a long-term energy source. They help with protection of organs, insulation, as well as helpful hormone creation, vitamin transportation, etc. And then proteins, they can come from both plants and animals. So you can get protein from plants and proteins from animals. Their main function is structural components of the cell, enzymes, antibodies, hormones, building things. The one thing you don't want to do, like you can if needed, proteins, yes, can give you energy, but proteins really shouldn't be your primary source of energy, because when you break a protein down, that nitrogen that is present in the protein that's not present in carbs and fats it is tough for the body, like the liver and the kidneys, to break down. So too much protein, especially if you're using that protein for energy, can actually be damaging to the body. So ideally, what you want to do is get your energy from carbs and fats, and then use your proteins for growth and repair. That's your ideal mix. And that's why you want a mix of all three. And then a recap of all the enzymes we've talked about. So these are all the enzymes we find in our small intestine. Lipase from the pancreas will be for fat breakdown. Trypsin and ellipsin from the pancreas and small intestine will be for protein breakdown. So going into smaller peptides and then amino acids. And then amylase and maltase, maltase being a disaccharidase, coming from the pancreas and the small intestine, going to our disaccharides and then our monosaccharides. So that's essentially what happens to your food when you eat it. Next video, we're going to talk about how we can actually affect enzymes, either speed them up or make them slower. So thanks again for watching, and we'll chat soon.